folks, welcome to my presentation on load balancing algorithms. Before we get started, let's talk a bit about what load balancing is. This is essentially the way in which servers will distribute high network traffic to ensure the smoothest um, communication between the client and the server. How is this done? This is done via a variety of algorithms, but the two most popular are round robin and least connections. In this experiment slash project, we're going to be also looking at random and first. Round robin is going one at a time at each VPS, random where a VPS is randomly selected, least connections where the server will try to see which VPS has the least amount of connections, active connections, and go to that. And first being where each VPS is given a designated max connections, and the load balancer will check which of the servers haven't met the max connections criteria and go to the first server that doesn't meet it. So the technology used for this project is very simple. DigitalOcean is a website that allows you to host your own virtual private servers. It basically gives you a little Linux system up there. HAProxy is the load balancing system I'm using. Work2 is what I use to test my work balancer, and RStudio is what I use to analyze data and make these beautiful graphs we'll be looking at in a bit. To run this project, I created a WordPress site which was running on Nginx. On each of these servers, the data among the servers were shared using GlustFS, and there was a private backend MySQL server which the WordPress site was connected to. Keep in mind that the WordPress server was duplicated on all three VPSs. The VPSs were arranged in this manner of the server architecture. So this is the initial server architecture where the user accesses the VPS which has WordPress on it, which connects to the SQL database. However, now the user accesses this VPS which has a load balancer on it, which will then redirect you to one of these three VPSs which each have WordPress shared among them, and all changes to WordPress in this server will be reflected among each other using GlustFS. And finally, it'll hook up to the database over here and then pull information from there. So that's our server architecture. Now, having run the information, we can look at the analysis. So before we go through the analysis, let's take a look at the key terms. Latency is essentially the time it takes for the server to respond back to you. You want to have the lowest possible latency. Throughput is the amount of requests that the server can handle per second. In this experiment, I had 15 requests a second at 100 concurrent users being run on 4 different threads for a duration of 60 seconds on my machine. Percentiles is essentially a look at how effective the latency is. A 2000 millisecond latency at the 50th percentile means that 50% of all requests had a latency of 2000. Idleness is essentially how free the VPS is. Higher the idleness, the better it is, because that essentially means the VPS is more free. So let's take a look at the comparison of the algorithms. Over here we have a couple of different algorithms that was run on HAProxy. Surprisingly, random is the lowest, but we can see that on the 99th percentile, it starts really weakening. The best performance, in my opinion, over here is on first, with the more popular ones, random and least connections, kind of performing badly, with least performance, however, performing better than round robin. We can also look at the idleness. When it comes to idleness, we can notice that the first and least connections have a similar idleness, while random and round robin have a similar idleness. Um, so, putting together this information, one could say that first is the best when using HA proxy because it has the lowest latency and the highest idleness over here. Um, I also did comparisons with DigitalOcean's inbuilt load balancer. They offer a commercial load balancer, and when I ran my experiment with them, I discovered that round robin for them worked better than their least connections, and when looking at the idleness of my machines, round robin also performed better. So I decided to then compare DigitalOcean and HA proxy, and surprisingly, when it comes to least connections, my implementation of HA proxy does better, even on the 99th percentile. Uh, but on round robin, DigitalOcean performs better all the way up to the 60th percentile. But after that, from the 60th to the 99th percentile, my HA proxy implementation does better. However, the difference is way minuscule as compared to the least connections. However, it would also seem that HA proxy has way more idleness uh, when it comes to least connections, but when it comes to round robin, the idleness is pretty much the same. And honestly, um, least connection kind of has more idleness, but there isn't a huge difference between the two. Um, so not much can be said over there. The next question that I wanted to ask was, do these algorithms scale? I did this by checking the difference between 3 and 2 VPSs. Unfortunately, DigitalOcean has a limit on how many VPSs you can have, so I was limited at 3. Surprisingly, when it comes to the first algorithm, it actually performed way worse when I added another VPS. But as expected, for the other 3 algorithms, it performs significantly better. Bring your attention to the 99th percentile on each of these 3, and we can see that it performs way better, and especially on the random VPS, it performs significantly better. However, latency isn't what's impressive. What's impressive is the idleness. Um, while the analysis of the while the first algorithm really doesn't have a huge difference at all between the 2 or 3, we can see there are bigger blue peaks in the 3 other algorithms for least connections, random, and round robin. And what this means is that scaling up using VPSs, while it does have a difference, not noticeable, not huge in terms of latency, it has a huge difference in terms of idleness. Um, and just for reference, I also compared it with DigitalOcean's load balancing scaling, and the same holds true. Especially at the 99th percentile, we can see that having 3 VPSs is way more advantageous than having 2 VPSs. When it comes to idleness, for least connections, it's pretty much the same on the idleness. But when it comes to round robin, which is DigitalOcean's more favored algorithm, it performs way better. Now, the final conclusions on this can be drawn from this graph. I personally believe that HA proxy wins. looking at this graph on the dotted line, which is all HA proxy, it performs way better on latency than any of DigitalOcean's performances. If you're using HA proxy, I recommend that you use the first algorithm implementation. Uh, However, this does not mean that there is no user case in which you don't use DigitalOcean. DigitalOcean offers amazing support, and creating a load balancer on DigitalOcean is just 3 clicks, literally. Uh, Thank you for watching my project.